I received a really good question about my last video, which was about budgeting. And if you didn't get a chance to watch that, I recommend you go back to my channel and take a look, which deals with budgeting for a single household or somebody that's newly in a single household. And the question really related to what do you do with health insurance and what do you do with HSAs when it comes to your budget? I said it's a really good question, and there's different ways to think about it, and we'll get into that further as we go through this video. Let's discuss the idea of pre-tax expenses versus post-tax expenses, and why does that distinction even matter? Pre-tax expenses means that it comes out of your pay before you pay any tax on it. So you don't pay income tax, and in most cases, you don't pay payroll taxes either. So you have more net because you don't have to apply taxes to it. This can apply to things like your healthcare premiums, HSA contributions, your contributions to a 401k. Any of those are pre-tax expenses. There's a difference, though, between healthcare premiums and the amounts that go into an HSA in one aspect, because I'm going to take the position that what you pay in premiums is more part of your fixed expenses. And what you put into your HSA, because of the fact that you can save it, that can actually go into the savings part of your budget. Even though they may be both be pre-tax, they are both, to me, they go in different parts of the budget because they're treated a little bit differently. And if we think about the overall budget, we start with our income, in the gross income before any taxes are taken out, and we show taxes as an expense. It doesn't necessarily matter if these are pre-tax or post-tax, because you're going to end up at the end of the day, if you're making, let's say, $2,000 a week, and on that you paid $400 of taxes. Well, that's part of where the $2,000 goes, that $400 of taxes. And those other amounts that are pre-tax, they're going to come out of the $2,000, so you see what you have left at the end of the month. The tax is just an expense, so you can think of it that way. Let's first talk about the healthcare premiums. They should fit into your budget as a fixed expense. It's something that you need. It's an amount that doesn't vary, and honestly, you can't live without it. You have to have some type of healthcare insurance. So to me, that's a fixed expense, and it goes into that 50% bucket. Those fixed expenses, those amounts that you really, they're the same every month. The only way they're going to change is once a year, your company can change the cost of your insurance, or if you take on a new job. But those are fixed expenses. Your health savings account, your HSA money. So I think that's more for the savings bucket if you use it in the most optimal way. And the most optimal way to use your HSA is to use it as retirement savings. If you can deviate from that if you have a big unusual expense and you have money in your HSA and you can't afford to pay it otherwise. But if it's just your visits to the doctor and things like that, and you can pay out of pocket, that's ideal because HSAs are very tax advantaged, and we can talk about that in a bit, but HSAs are really tax advantaged, and so that's why you want to use that as a form of savings. Let's talk about the tax benefits of an HSA. To me, it's the most tax advantaged way that we can save for retirement, because HSAs are triple tax free. And I'll talk about what I mean by that. If you put money into your HSA, you don't pay tax on it. You can invest your HSA and you don't pay tax on the growth. And if you use your HSA to pay for what the IRS considers to be qualified medical expenses, you don't pay tax on money that you pull out of an HSA. And the really cool thing about it is that you don't have to have that expense when you pull the money out this year or the year that you put the money in. It could be, if you open up an HSA today, you could let that money sit in that HSA for years. If you're in your 40s and you have an HSA and you're going to retire at 65, that money could sit and grow in your HSA for 20 plus years. And then when you retire or whatever you decide to pull it out, as long as it's for qualified medical expenses that year that are less than whatever you put into your HSA historically, you don't pay tax when you pull that money out. So that's a huge advantage because you could use it to pay for your long-term care and your health care in retirement. But you could also say, I have other money and I want to go buy something, whatever it may be. And you could use your HSA money for that as long as you had enough in expenses since you established that HSA to cover it. You have to keep records and things like that. It's not like you just do it. But it's a really unknown thing. And there's lots of other aspects of HSAs, but we're not going to get into those today because it goes kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about in this budget discussion. But let's also talk about HSAs in the context of divorce. One of the things that I think is really important when we're looking at assets for divorce is that we look at each different type of asset by its tax characteristics, and we want to share each of those assets by their tax characteristics. So if you have a 401k or an IRA, that's double tax free. You don't pay tax on the money that goes in, you don't pay tax on the growth, you pay tax when it comes out. That's one bucket. Then if you have some type of Roth account, you paid tax on that money when it went in, it was after tax dollars. You don't pay tax on the growth and you won't pay tax when you pull the money out. That's double tax free, but in a different way. So those shouldn't be in the same bucket. Now you have the HSA. Like I said, that's triple tax free. So it's not the same as either of those other types of retirement accounts. So that should also be a separate bucket. So to me, you want to look at each separate one. And that applies to taxable accounts too. There's lots of other things you want to do to make sure that you're sharing the tax attributes equally. That's an important part to me of how you divide the assets up. Let's tie things back to the initial question. Health insurance, when you're looking at that, I would treat it as part of your fixed budget. And when you're thinking about your budget, let's talk about it in gross terms. Let's start with whatever your gross pay is, and then we can take all our expenses, and taxes are going to be one of our expense. So that way we don't have to distinguish between which expenses are pre-tax and which are after tax, because we'll just count tax as one of our expenses so we can figure out where everything's going. When it comes to your HSA, I would take that and put it as part of your savings or investment. I know that the idea of a budget, a lot of people don't like that idea. I've had people that I ask them questions and I don't want anybody to tell me how to spend my money. Nobody's telling you how to spend your money. That's not the point of this. The point is to really understand what's coming in and what's going out, and to make sure that at the end of the day, you have something left over and you're not building up debt and getting yourself into a worse position. So it's really important to have that budget. And you can take this to a different extent. I'm reading a book right now called Your Money or Your Life, in which he really talks about it. And he starts in step one, the author, with pulling out all your tax returns and figuring out every dollar that you ever earned and then tracking every penny that you spend. Like, that doesn't sound like fun at all, but you can learn a lot from it. I know when I bought a townhouse before I was married, I was worried that I couldn't pay the mortgage. I wasn't sure. And so I would carry a piece of paper around with me. This was way before I even knew this book existed. But I would carry a piece of paper around with me and I would write down everything that I spent money on. It didn't matter if it was less than $1. I would write it down because I wanted to know where my money was going. And when I finished, after a month or so, I put it into a worksheet and I looked at what all my expenses were. And it was really a good thing to do because after I did that, I could look at my mortgage payment and what my money that was coming in was and say, I know I can make this payment because here's expenses that if things got tight, I could easily cut them out. And maybe you should just cut them out anyway, because it's a way to help you save if you're spending money needlessly. But once you start to get an understanding of what you're spending your money on and where it's going, it makes it so much easier to figure out what are the things that you really want to spend your money on and what are the things you don't. If you found this video helpful, please like, follow, and subscribe. And if you go down to the description, you'll find a link to my free budgeting worksheet, which can help you in figuring this out for yourself.